The doors of the initiation hall groaned open, and the air changed. Every cadet felt it first, the vibration in their chests, the deep rumble echoing through stone and steel. Then came the sound, claws clicking against the floor, a growl that seemed to scrape at bone. The war beast was awake. No one spoke. Even the loudest braggarts went silent as the creature padded into view, its eyes burning gold in the half-light. Taller than a warhorse, shoulders knotted with muscle, its breath hissed like steam escaping a furnace. A line of cadets stood waiting, every one of them knowing the same thing. Today, they weren't being measured by instructors, they were being measured by it. The ritual was simple. The beast would test them, one by one, with a snarl, a snap of jaws, a swipe of claws. Those who flinched too much failed. Those who stood their ground passed. That was all. At least, that was what the instructors promised. The first cadet in line trembled as the beast lowered its head to sniff him. A guttural growl rolled out of its chest, and the cadet nearly fainted. The beast moved on, unimpressed. Another cadet tried to meet its gaze and was shoved aside by handlers before he lost a hand. Again, the beast prowled forward, leaving only shame in its wake. And all the while, at the end of the line, a human boy stood waiting, soft-skinned, unarmed, forgettable. The cadets who had mocked him earlier smirked now, whispering to one another. They weren't sure what would happen when the beast reached him, but they all agreed on one thing. He wouldn't last a heartbeat. The instructors stood on the high platform overlooking the trial. Commander Dren had run this test for over 40 years, and never once seen the beast do anything other than snarl, snap, dismiss. It was bred to judge fear, raised to identify the hesitant, the weak. He glanced down the line of cadets, past the braced stances and wide eyes, to the boy standing at the end. Small, pale, a visible scar, curved from the back of his jaw to the top of his neck, surgical, but old, not hidden. No attempt at cosmetic correction. Dren squinted. Is that the Earthborn? His assistant instructor, a lean Avari female named CN, checked her roster. Yes, Jackson Cole. Terran exchange program. You cleared him for this? He didn't object. Of course he hadn't. Earthborn never did. They always just stood there like they'd already survived the worst. The war beast snarled again, testing the next cadet in line. The boy flinched hard, stumbled back. The handlers pulled him away without ceremony. One more reject. The beast kept moving. The hall echoed with the sound of claw against stone. The beast moved slowly, deliberately, each step a thunderclap in the minds of the watching recruits. Cadets stared ahead, not daring to glance sideways, but they heard the muffled gasps, the soft weeping, the sound of knees buckling as the beast prowled past. It sniffed a Raksari female and bared its teeth. She tried not to scream. She failed. It moved on. At the fifth cadet, it reared up and slammed a claw down inches from his feet. He fell back hard, whimpering. The beast didn't even growl. It just looked disappointed. And still, it moved. By the time the beast was halfway down the line, tension choked the air like smoke. Even instructors fell silent. The cadets at the end of the line had begun to sway on their feet. Only one stood motionless. Jackson Cole. No armor, no shielding. Just his black cadet uniform and a pair of battered boots that had clearly seen Earth's worst terrain. His hands were loose at his sides, his spine straight, his gaze forward. He hadn't blinked in nearly a minute. Two cadets behind him watched, puzzled. Why isn't he sweating? One hissed. He doesn't even look nervous, the other whispered. He should be shaking. The human didn't respond. He just waited. The beast passed another cadet, hissed with disinterest, then turned its head. It was close now. 5 bodies away. 4, 3. And something changed. It slowed. Its pupils narrowed. Its breath deepened. Its claws began to click harder against the floor, scraping at the stone with a rhythm that made the air feel heavier. Instructors straightened. What's it doing? Cyan asked. It's agitated, Dren said. I've never seen that before. The beast moved forward. 2 cadets now. Then, 1. And then it stopped in front of the human. The entire hall went silent. No breath, no words, just the low, subsonic growl of the war beast, inches from Jackson Cole. It stepped closer, snarled, and Jackson didn't move. The beast circled. Its massive shoulders twitched with every breath. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, tracking the human from every angle. It sniffed once, slow, deliberate. Then again. And then it lunged. Not a full strike, but a lightning-quick snap of jaws just short of contact, teeth glinting like blades. Jackson didn't flinch. The beast's growl shook the walls. Still, Jackson held steady. Not rigid, not frozen, just present. The beast stepped in until its chest was nearly touching his. The heat from its breath steamed against the human's neck. Jackson blinked once. Then the war beast exhaled sharply, a burst of steam, and lowered its head. Its front legs bent. Its massive body sank. And in the center of the initiation hall, under 100 silent stares, the war beast knelt. The translator collar on its neck buzzed once, then growled with ancient syntax. Bearer of scars. No one moved. No one spoke. The beast remained bowed, unmoving. Jackson didn't smile. He didn't step back. He simply reached one hand out and placed it gently against the side of the creature's head, his palm resting just behind its eye. A sign of thanks, not ownership. Respect returned. The instructors on the platform stared. Dren dropped his clipboard. The beast, the apex predator, had knelt. And now, the entire initiation hall was asking the same question. Who the hell is this human? The war beast rose slowly, muscle by muscle, its bulk unfolding like a siege engine brought to life. It loomed over Jackson again, the human still unmoving, hand at his side now, gaze steady. But the tension had drained from the room. The beast didn't growl this time. It didn't sniff. It didn't bare its teeth. It turned and walked away. Not with haste, not with indifference, with respect. It returned to its handlers and sat beside them as it had never done before. The beast had always kept pacing, circling, never resting until the line of cadets was gone. But now it sat and watched the human like it had seen something the rest of the galaxy had missed. The instructors didn't speak. They didn't need to. The cadets' stunned silence told them everything. And Jackson? He walked back to the formation line, slow and calm, like none of it had surprised him. Only when he reached his place and stood at ease did anyone finally find their voice. He didn't flinch, someone whispered. He didn't move, another said. A third, shaking, murmured. It bowed. One cadet, a tall Skarn male with layered scale plating, stepped forward and pointed. It's a trick. There's no way the beast submits. He's not special, he's just scarred. The Skarn sneered. Anyone can get cut up and live. All eyes turned to Jackson. They hadn't noticed it before, but now they were looking closely. Not at his face. At the scars. Down his left forearm, a spiral of pale lines, not neat, not surgical, bite marks, some deep, healed unevenly. Across the top of his hand, a line that had gone through tendon, another along the back of his neck, barely visible but jagged. And there, where the collar of his shirt dipped more, not self-inflicted, not aesthetic, not decorative. Survivor scars. The kind that came from places where help never arrived fast enough, where the only medic was your own shaking hands and whatever you could rip off your clothes to stop the bleeding. The kind of scars the war beast had recognized. A different instructor spoke, her voice crackling over the arena's broadcast system. Silence. The cadets froze. Cadet Jackson Cole of Earth, step forward. He did. Commander Dren leaned over the platform rail, looking down at him. Explain this. Jackson glanced at the beast, then back at the crowd. I didn't do anything, I just stood still. Dren narrowed his eyes. The war beast has never submitted. Then maybe it saw something you didn't, Jackson said. The hall held its breath. Dren's jaw worked, but he didn't reply. Cien, beside him, pulled up the beast's biometric readings. Her fingers twitched through the interface. Sir, she said quietly. The creature's stress levels spiked before contact, then dropped to flatline. It wasn't reacting in fear. It was recognizing something. Another instructor added, This is not in the training protocols. We have no precedent for it. Start writing one, Cien muttered. Word spread within an hour. Not just in the initiation hall, but through every training sector, every simulation chamber, every wing of the academy. The war beast had bowed. And the boy it bowed to wasn't armored, wasn't bred for war, wasn't engineered or cybernetically enhanced. He was human. In the barracks that night, no one laughed at Jackson, not even the ones who used to make jokes about his soft skin or his lack of claws. They didn't know what to say. He sat on the edge of his bunk, rewrapping the gauze on his hand. One of the smaller scars had reopened slightly during the day's trial. A younger cadet, one of the newer Vreni, approached him quietly. She was barely into her first week. "You didn't look afraid." Jackson glanced up. "I was." Her head tilted. "But you didn't run." "That's not the same thing." She nodded, trying to understand. "Why did it kneel?" He tightened the bandage around his palm. "Because I've met things like it before. Just smaller. And meaner." "You didn't fight them?" "No. And then how did you survive?" Jackson looked up at her. "I didn't die." She didn't ask any more questions. The next morning, the instructors called a full assembly. Commander Dren stood at the front, hands behind his back, posture rigid. He didn't look pleased. But he didn't look angry either. Just unsettled. This academy was built to train cadets from every known biome, from every registered species. It was designed to test resolve, not through combat, but through endurance. He gestured to a projection above him, footage from the initiation hall, the beast approaching, the kneel. The freeze frame of the words, "bearer of scars." Until yesterday, Dren continued, no cadet had ever drawn submission from the war beast. The room remained silent. No protocol exists for this scenario, no ranking, no commendation. What happened was not anticipated. He paused. But it was witnessed. And it will be recorded. CN stepped forward, holding a new datapad. As of this cycle, Earthborn cadets will be flagged with a revised notation, psychologically non-standard under traditional fear metrics. She looked directly at Jackson. "That's not meant as an insult." He shrugged. "Didn't sound like one." Dren took over again. As a result, Cadet Jackson Cole will face one additional trial. A few cadets gasped. Someone whispered, "Another one? Why?" Dren's gaze hardened. "To verify the war beast's judgment." Jackson didn't blink. "When?" "Tomorrow." The room buzzed with unease. One cadet muttered, what more could they throw at him? Another, watching Jackson's unreadable face, answered quietly, "Whatever it, Island, he'll survive it." And from the shadows of the hall, still unseen by most, the war beast watched, uncaged, waiting. The next morning, the training dome had changed. It no longer resembled a simulation chamber. The ceiling had retracted, exposing the steel sky and letting cold winds sweep through. The instructors had stripped the environment down to its harshest elements, a cracked, uneven terrain, soaked in freezing mist, flanked by artificial cliffs that radiated heat on one side and cold on the other. It was a calibration nightmare, which was exactly the point. This wasn't a test of tactics or brute strength. It was designed to break something else entirely. Jackson stood at the edge of the dome, wearing the same black cadet uniform from the initiation. No armor, no thermal padding, no chemical shielding. Just the same half-worn boots and light jacket zipped to his throat. Across from him, alien cadets were suiting up. Reka, a saurian with heat-sensitive scales, locked her neckplate into place. Next to her, Toller, a quadrupedal trooper from the Thaxan homeworld, adjusted the intake vents on his toxin-rated respirator. Even the instructors wore safety badges keyed to alert if the atmospheric balance drifted out of breathable tolerance. Jackson did not. He exhaled once, rubbed his scarred hand over his face, and stepped forward. Commander Dren's voice rang out from the observation platform. "This trial is voluntary. You may withdraw at any time. Doing so will not impact your academic standing." He didn't even pause to see if anyone stepped back. Then, begin. The terrain shifted instantly. The ground beneath their feet dropped 5 degrees in seconds. A freezing wind snapped across the field. On the far side, vents activated, blowing furnace-hot air that shimmered the horizon and warped the terrain. Searing heat to one side, freezing air to the other. A constant pull between extremes. And in between, the cadets were tasked with crossing through a series of gates, timed to random intervals. Miss 1, you restart the section. Miss 2, you forfeit. Reika moved first, low and fast, her suit dispersing heat in quick pulses. Toller thundered after her, his weight stabilizing him as the temperature rocked. Two others followed. Jackson walked. Not quickly, not dramatically. He just walked. Through the first gate, into a blast of icy air that would have locked most cadets' joints in under a minute. His teeth gritted. His left knee buckled for a heartbeat, the old injury, but he didn't fall. He pressed his hand against his thigh once, muttered, "Come on," and kept moving. One cadet behind him dropped to a knee. The chill had reached their exposed lower leg. Instructors flagged an assist drone to pull them clear. Vitals dropping. Initiate extraction. By the third gate, acid mist had entered the field. It was synthetic, weak enough not to scar, but strong enough to burn if inhaled unfiltered. Cadets' suits hissed and sealed. Jackson had no such defense. He covered his mouth with one arm, kept his head low, and moved faster. The mist bit into his exposed hand. He flinched but didn't stop. One of the monitoring medics leaned toward the readout, frowning. Human subject, displaying elevated cortisol and surface inflammation. He should fall back. Dr. Harrow, stationed beside the monitors, said nothing. The war beast, sitting behind the glass, growled once low and even. And still, Jackson moved forward. At the sixth gate, the terrain trembled. Gravity surged. Toller staggered sideways, his massive body crashing into the ground. He struggled to rise, groaning as his spine plates ground against the compacted dirt. Jackson stumbled too, the force spiked above Earth normal, and his body, already drained by cold, heat, and inhalation strain, resisted. He collapsed to his hands and knees, panting. His left wrist shook. Every breath came shallow. He turned his head and vomited once into the dirt, wiped his mouth, and forced himself upright. The display above the arena flashed. Human vitals. Elevated. Fatigue critical. Then, blinking underneath. Withdrawal suggested. Jackson stared at the message, sweat freezing at the edges of his brows. He held up one middle finger to the monitor. And kept walking. At Gate 10, swarm stingers were released. Small, fast, programmed to identify heat signatures and deliver microshocks. Non-lethal, but disorienting. Reika's suit handled them with ease. She activated her deflection field and moved smoothly. Toller, limping now, swatted them away with mechanical claws. Jackson stood still as the first wave struck. The stingers latched to his sleeves, sparked. One caught his neck, he grimaced and slapped it away. Another struck his left side, digging into the fabric. He yanked it out with his bare hand, leaving a fresh welt. "Damn things sting worse than hornets," he muttered. He shook his shoulders, drew a breath, and charged forward, batting them aside with both arms like someone fighting off smoke. By the time he crossed the next marker, his right forearm was bleeding. But he smiled. Outside the arena, cadets watched from behind reinforced glass. Most had gone silent an hour ago. Even the ones who'd once mocked him. No one laughed now. Every step the human took left more blood in the dirt. Every stumble was followed by recovery. And the war beast had not looked away once. It sat pressed against the glass wall, eyes locked on the figure staggering through its trial, not out of sympathy, but out of recognition. Final gate. The air pressure dropped. The simulation cranked environmental settings into storm mode, crosswinds, sideways rain, thunder so loud it made internal organs shift. Jackson leaned into it. His jacket was torn, his lips split, his fingers trembled, one eye had swollen half shut. But he walked forward, jaw clenched, arms steady at his sides. Lightning crashed nearby. He didn't flinch. He looked up into the storm, rain pouring over his bruised face, and shouted through cracked lips. "This all you got?" The sky answered with another flash. He staggered forward again. And past the last gate. The alarm sounded. Trial complete. Medics rushed the field. 3 cadets were stretchered out, 2 under full oxygen. Reika was helped to her feet, visibly shaking. Jackson sat down where he stood and coughed red into his sleeve. Dr. Harrow knelt beside him immediately. "Talk to me." "Shortness of breath," he said hoarsely. "Probably pulmonary irritation. 2 stings embedded in my lower back. Mild tendon stress in my knee." You can't self-diagnose in this state. I'm fine. You're not. I'm alive, he said. Same thing. She looked at him and said nothing more. Just applied a stim patch to his arm and wrapped a pressure band around his ribs. Behind them, the war beast approached the gate handlers, allowing it only so far. It didn't snarl. It didn't growl. It bowed its head again. And for the first time, the human's classification system flagged a cross-species behavior. Designation: protective submission. Subject: war beast. Target: human, Cole, Jackson. Implication: leadership acknowledged. And across the academy, something shifted. Because the war beast, bred to judge the worthy by fear, had just chosen its alpha. And its alpha bled like any man but didn't stop walking. Jackson wasn't cleared for training for 4 days. Dr. Harrow had overruled every instructor who tried to wave off the injuries as non-critical. She had treated his chest bruising, flushed the acidic stinger wounds, administered antibiotics to preempt the risk of airborne pathogen exposure from the simulation. The fatigue markers in his blood work were severe enough that any other cadet would have been put on bed rest for a week. Jackson lasted 36 hours before trying to sneak out of the infirmary. Harrow caught him as he reached for his boots. "You haven't healed," she said, arms crossed. He looked up, one hand still inside the boot's heel. "I've healed enough." "You tore muscle, Cole. I saw the scans. I saw the damage to your lungs. Your right knee's carrying twice its weight from compensating for the left side. You're already favoring it in your stride." "I can walk." "Being able to walk isn't the same as being ready." He paused. "You think I don't know the difference?" Harrow blinked. He stood, slowly. "I've been doing this since I was 12. Patching myself up with duct tape and boiled rags, ice packs from busted freezer bags, cheap stitches, crutches made out of fence posts." She didn't interrupt. "I've healed on rooftops, under overpasses, in the back of pickups, and in storm shelters with no power. You think 4 days of proper rest is going to scare me?" Finally, she asked, "Why are you in such a hurry?" Jackson looked down at his boots. "I don't like being still." Outside the medbay, things had changed. He wasn't sure when it started. The glances in the corridor weren't mocking anymore. They were watchful, curious, measured. Cadets stepped aside as he walked past, not rudely, not fearfully, but like they were giving space to something they didn't fully understand. He hated it. The whispers followed. Not mean, but heavy. "That's him." He didn't cry. He bled for 6 hours. "I heard the beast followed him after the trial." It had. Sort of. They'd returned it to its enclosure after the trial, but the handlers had noticed changes. It refused food until it was allowed to see Jackson through the enclosure glass. When he appeared, it would eat. It refused all commands unless Jackson's name was mentioned. It would growl at other cadets if they approached its cell too closely. One of the older instructors had joked that it had imprinted on him. Another, less confident, had called it what it was: recognition. Commander Dren summoned Jackson for a formal review. He arrived still stiff from the healing tissue in his back, his gait uneven but his eyes sharp. "Sit," Dren said. Jackson stayed standing. Dren grunted. "You know what this is about." "Everyone knows," Jackson said. "It's the first time the war beast has ever identified a cadet as an alpha." "Because I didn't flinch?" "No," Dren said, "because you're still here." That gave Jackson pause. Dren leaned forward. "I've been watching cadets for decades. I've seen bodies crumple under pressure, minds crack before a trial even begins. Some scream, some break, some freeze, and some endure." He stood and walked slowly to the display wall. "Endurance isn't about surviving a hit," he said. "It's about surviving enough hits, so many that you forget what comfort feels like, and keep moving anyway." He turned back to Jackson. That's what the beast saw. The scars weren't decoration. They were language. Jackson stayed quiet. "You spoke fluently," Dren added. "So what happens now?" Jackson asked. Dren sighed. "Now, we wait." "For what?" "For the others." They came within a week. The second Earthborn cadet was a girl, tall, lean, quiet. Her name was Kira. She wore long sleeves and had calluses that didn't match her file's sports history. The scanner at the gate flashed red again. Warning. Origin, Earth. Handle with caution. She flinched when it buzzed, but didn't stop walking. The war beast, still in observation protocol, stirred in its enclosure. The moment she entered the hall, it stood. Within a month, 3 more arrived. A marine biologist's son with a fused shoulder from a shark bite. A forestry cadet who had once carried her twin through a burning wildlife preserve. A quiet, wiry kid from Alaska who'd survived 6 days in a collapsed cabin during a blizzard alone with a compound fracture. All of them bore it. The scars. The silence. The gaze that didn't waver when instructors shouted, or when alarms blared, or when others broke under stress. They didn't brag. They didn't flinch. They just showed up. The Academy tried to adjust its protocols. A new sub-designation appeared in the files. Earthborn Variant, Scar Class. Not an insult. Not a compliment. Just an acknowledgement. These weren't elite warriors, not yet. But they knew pain. They understood fear. And they moved anyway. It terrified the staff more than they let on. One afternoon, as Jackson sat outside the arena, watching a new simulation group stumble through obstacle drills, Kira sat beside him. "They're starting to call us that now," she said. He looked over. "Scar Class?" She nodded. "Heard it 3 times today. How do you feel about it?" She shrugged. "Better than soft-skinned." He smiled faintly. She looked at him. "Why do you think the beast chose you first?" He thought for a moment. "Because it saw someone who'd already lost things." "And survived?" "No," he said. "Someone who didn't expect to survive. And kept moving anyway." They sat in silence for a while, the distant thunder of falling cadets echoing from the arena. Then, from behind the reinforced glass of its enclosure, the war beast rose again. Watching, waiting. Not for prey, but for its kin. The final phase of cadet training wasn't a simulation. It wasn't watched. It wasn't even monitored directly. It was called The Crossing. A 7-day field survival trial, off-world, on an uncolonized moon designed for raw environmental stress. No shelters, no supply drops, no external contact. Just a beacon placed at the far edge of a volcanic ridge system. Find the beacon, activate it, return. That was all. The moon's surface temperatures ranged from sweltering daylight to below freezing at night. Terrain was unstable. Oxygen was thin. The gravity was sharp enough to press every joint into aching submission by day 3. Cadets were sent in groups of 5. Each team was selected to be balanced strength, strategy, stamina, field medicine, and stress control. When Jackson's team roster was announced, no one questioned it. It included Kira. The Alaskan boy, Will. A medical candidate from the flood coasts, Rachel. And Jackson. All of them Earthborn. All of them Scar Class. And the war beast? The instructors didn't plan to bring it. But it refused to eat the day the roster was posted. And when the dropship powered up, it snarled at the handlers and lay at the cargo ramp until the order was given. They let it board. Not as a participant. As an escort. The crossing began with fire. The first storm system moved in hours after deployment. Volcanic ash, mixed with electrical dust, and magnetically charged particles that made visibility impossible. Most teams delayed movement. Jackson's did not. They moved during the storm. Wrapped in heat-damp scarves and repurposed ponchos, they navigated by feel, breath control, and memory. Kira tracked terrain shifts, Will tested paths with a weighted pole. Rachel monitored hydration and symptoms. Jackson kept the pace. The war beast walked behind them, silent, watching. By day 3, another team had activated emergency evac protocols, heat exhaustion, and a leg injury from a sinkhole fall. By day 4, 3 more had lost members. One was found hypoxic, another concussed. Jackson's team still moved. Not fast, not without pain, but they moved. And that was the point. On day 5, Will collapsed. Not dramatically, just a quiet stumble and a sharp inhale. Jackson was beside him before he hit the ground. "Talk to me." "Left ankle. Might be a tendon." Will gritted out. Jackson helped him sit, unlaced the boot, and palpated the joint. The tissue was swollen, slight discoloration. Nothing snapped. Not ruptured, Jackson muttered. Ligament strain. He looked at Rachel. She nodded. Wrap and compress. But he can't carry weight. Jackson stood, took Will's pack, slung it over his own. Let's go. I can limp, Will said, trying to stand. You don't need to. I'm not going to slow the team. You won't, Jackson replied, because we won't leave you behind. Will didn't argue again. Kira adjusted formation. Rachel supported Will from the right. Jackson led the way. Behind them, the war beast growled softly, a sound like distant thunder. Not anger. Approval. By day 6, blisters cracked on Jackson's feet. His knee had swollen again, and he moved with a limp. Kira had torn skin along her fingers from constant climbing. Rachel's lips were split from dehydration, and Will's ankle had swollen visibly through the wrap. No one said a word about it. The final ridge loomed ahead, a jagged slope, sharp with obsidian shards and uneven footing. And, at the top, the beacon. One final climb. Go around? Rachel suggested. No time, Kira said. Storm walls forming again. Jackson looked at Will. Can you climb if we boost you? Will shook his head. Only with support. I've got him, Rachel said. They nodded. Then looked at Jackson. He didn't hesitate. He began the climb. The shards bit into his palms. One sliced his thigh. The incline forced pressure onto his bad knee. He groaned once but didn't stop. Halfway up, his left hand slipped. His weight shifted. The old wrist injury screamed, and he nearly fell. The war beast moved. It surged up the slope beside him, claws digging into stone like it was sand, and stopped just below his position. Jackson grabbed the thick fur at its shoulder, steadied himself, and climbed the final meters. The beacon lit under his hand. Transmission sent. Trial complete. They didn't collapse at the top. They stood. 5 Earthborn cadets. And 1 war beast at their side. The return was slow, quiet. When the dropship found them, Rachel had bandaged everyone's feet, and Kira had tied strips of her own uniform around Jackson's arm to keep it elevated. The war beast walked up the ramp beside them and lay at their feet. Not once did it challenge command. It followed them. Back at the academy, something had shifted. The instructors didn't announce winners. There were no medals. Just a list posted. Crossing, complete, Team 7, Earthborn. Underneath, in smaller print, all members returned alive. There was a silence across the training wings for 2 days. No cadet mocked the scars anymore. No one called them soft. Instructors reclassified Earthborn entries again. Psych profile. Scar class. Status. High risk tolerance. Potential leadership. Confirmed. Later, as the Earthborn team stood at the edge of the arena, watching younger cadets stumble through basic obstacle drills, one of the instructors approached. It was Commander Dren. He stood with arms folded, watching Jackson. The beast follows you still. Jackson nodded. Dren looked down. You never asked it to. I didn't need to. Why? Jackson didn't answer right away. Then he looked at the younger cadets, falling into mud, slipping on the climbs, rising again. Because it knows, he said. Knows what? That scars aren't weakness. Dren nodded once. They're records. Jackson turned. They're proof. He stepped forward. The beast followed. And the galaxy finally understood what it meant when it whispered, Bearer of scars. Not broken. Not fragile. But forged.